Today we're going to be talking about everything that Bill Gates, the media, and the politicians don't want you to know about the SARS coronavirus. We've been doing a lot of that lately. But in this broadcast, we're really going to be focusing on acidosis and the role it plays in the pathology of this disease, COVID, caused by SARS 2.0, originating in a laboratory. This is a bioweapons attack, a war crime. People need to hang, to say the least. But we're going to be covering a lot of white papers from Nature and the like. Many scientific publications, such as this one, talking about SARS coronavirus entry into host cells. And in this article, in many articles in fact, we see that pH or acidity is a huge factor. We found that SARS-CoV enters cells via pH and receptor-dependent endocytosis. What is endocytosis? What happens, ladies and gentlemen? Basically, it's a lock and key type of situation. The virus locks into the ACE2 receptor, and then the invagination or endocytosis begins, and the cell membrane basically surrounds the particle, the virus, the molecule, the package of the docking process, and essentially lets it float into the cytoplasm, where it is driven to its source by micromachines. We're talking about nanotechnology here. If you ever wanted, to find proof that life was designed, it's right there in the DNA and all of the micromachines, the proteins that it makes. It's a wonderful world that we live in, ladies and gentlemen. And science right now is beginning to understand this genetic code. It's beginning to understand these micromachines that are around us. But what we're seeing in the literature, essentially, is that many of these docking procedures are facilitated by pH balance, acidity or alkaline. It's kind of like a car battery. It's like electricity. And you've got all sorts of pumps and mechanisms transporting molecules and other things in and out of the cells, to and from different destinations in the cells, the nucleus, the mitochondria, the ribosome. How does that all happen, ladies and gentlemen? In this Nature.com publication, hydroxychloroquine, a less toxic derivative of chloroquine, is effective in inhibiting SARS-CoV infection in vitro. Of course, in vitro means test tube, and in vivo means living, ladies and gentlemen. This is Stranger Than Fiction News, broadcasting live. And here we are, another Nature publication. And in this article it says, both chloroquine and hydroxychloroquine are weak bases that are known to elevate the pH of acidic inside cellular organelles, like little organs in the cells, organelles, such as endosomes and lysosomes, essential for membrane fusion. What they're discovering here, why is there a big buzz about hydroxychloroquine? It's because it elevates the pH inside the cells and the organelles. But essentially the chemistry within the cell is a little more basic or acidic or neutral. And playing with that chemistry may or may not have positive effects. And, the chemistry that's going on in the human cell, in the human body, is far beyond, mixing vinegar and baking soda together for some kind of volcanic eruption. We are not talking about that kind of chemistry. We are talking about a chemistry with nearly infinite chemical reactions going on at the same time. Endless metabolic pathways. You think the big cities are high traffic. What's going on in your body right now? That's high traffic as well. In any case, ladies and gentlemen, let's get back to this article. But playing with the chemistry can or cannot have positive effects. Every medicine is some kind of, novel molecule that does something. It plays with the chemistry. We could talk about that forever. But we're talking essentially about geometric shapes at a nanoscale, working together like a lock and key or like a bottle and a bottle opener, essentially. Form follows function and function follows form. That's, a key principle in molecular biology, you could say. And it's all constructed by this DNA. It's amazing. It's amazing. Anyways, here we are back to pH levels, hydroxychloroquine. Lots of, positive results. Doctors are stepping forward saying it works. They haven't lost a patient. And the mainstream media and Bill Gates and company don't want you to know. That makes them complicit in this mass murder pandemic scheme that was cooked up and delivered from a lab since the beginning. And they are trying to sell you this disingenuous story. Oh, it came from the wet market. No, it came from the lab. Everybody knows it came from the lab. And they've known that it came from the lab and have told you otherwise because they wanted you to get infected. That's the truth that needs to come out. You need to know who's infected you with their virus, because this thing didn't just, show up in the jungle somewhere or some little village near the jungle. This was like a block away from the Wuhan lab. This thing was delivered like a pizza. Somebody made a call and they opened a vial and people got infected. Those were the first days of this SARS-2 epidemic. In any case, the idea here is that hydroxychloroquine works because it changes the pH inside the cells. And we've actually got quite a bit of studies on acidosis and cancer. All sorts of, publications, and you can find this on PubMed. You can look up all of these titles and, follow along, expand your research, replay on demand, all of that. But here in this abstract, the extracellular pH of solid tumors is acidic due to a combination of high rates of lactic acid production and poor perfusion. This has been documented for years, etc., etc. We're finding that acidosis, or the acidification of the blood, the organism, the body, in fact, acidification leads to all sorts of diseases. That's what we're discovering. So if you could just kind of buffer your chemistry a little bit and keep it on the, neutral, slightly basic, the science tells us that definitely works in your favor. And we're going to be getting into all of this sodium bicarbonate therapy in patients with metabolic acidosis. But these are terms that you should essentially familiarize yourself with. We're also going to be talking about coronavirus disease spectrum, what does it do beyond pneumonia? You need to know. So stay tuned. This is Stranger Than Fiction News, broadcasting live from the dark side of the planet. We want to inject this real quick. You know, you're waiting for a vaccine. Don't ditch the mask just yet, they say. A nearly $6 billion, probably $6.066 billion, has been allocated for clinical trials. But check this out. Recently released federal guidelines say that a COVID-19 vaccine can be authorized for use if it is safe and effective in as few as 50% of the people. Let's hope they mean effective and not safe. In any case, none of the vaccines, you won't be able to sue any of the vaccine makers for their COVID vaccines, so there's no telling what's in it. This is from the LA Times. I mean, this is mainstream press. And this will get, censored and banned. They can publish it, but we can't talk about it. It can show up maybe once on the radar and disappear, and they're like, we told you. But I think it's important to talk about it and dwell on it. Like the Pedogate, Pizzagate, like the death towers, like the eugenics programs, like everything out there, ladies and gentlemen. So let's start real quick from the beginning, shall we? According to Nature Cell Research, SARS coronavirus entry into host cells goes through a novel chain of events and pathways that are dependent on cellular pH and receptor. So there's something to be said about the chemistry of what's going on here. And the reason that hydroxychloroquine works, and this has been, in the papers for quite some time, is that they believe it reduces the pH somehow of lysosomes and other endosomes. Hydroxychloroquine are weak bases that are known to raise the pH above 7, hopefully, of acidic intracellular organelles essential for membrane fusion. So the reason they think this works is because it raises the pH. And now comes the idea of sodium bicarbonate or baking soda. And it has, a unique chemical pathway. And what's interesting here is that there's been, quite a bit of research done on acidosis and sodium bicarbonate as a way to, intervene, form of therapy. Let's just read a little bit of this abstract here. Bicarbonate increases tumor pH and inhibits spontaneous metastases. The external pH of solid tumors is acidic as a consequence of increased metabolism. Notice how they say outside and not inside. External pH. We'll get into that. Acid pH has been shown to stimulate tumor cell invasion and metastasis in vitro and in cells before injection in vivo. The present study investigates whether inhibition of this tumor acidity will reduce the incidence of in vivo metastasis, and we're going to have to find their conclusion on the full text, but essentially they found some positive consequences. Acidosis in cancer from mechanism to neutralization. Again, this is all PubMed, National Institute of Health. Okay, but there's so much there, and you got to connect the dots. The extracellular pH of solid tumors is unequivocally acidic due to a combination of high rates of lactic acid production, a consequence of glycolysis. Who remembers that? And poor perfusion. This has been documented by us and others in a wide variety of solid tumor models. Finally, this review will discuss the neutralization of acidity that can be used to inhibit carcinogenesis and metastasis and improve anti-cancer immunotherapy. who would have thought baking soda was going to be linked to all of this? Sodium bicarbonate in therapy in patients with metabolic acidosis. Now, the debate on baking soda, believe it or not, has been raging in, the medical community. The debate has been raging for quite some time. And it almost seems like it's become political in a way. Because this is too cheap and, there are medicines that could maybe do the same thing. Or maybe do it better or maybe do it worse. Maybe we'll get into that. Metabolic acidosis occurs when a relative accumulation of plasma anions and excess of cations reduces plasma pH. I thought we had a formula here, maybe something like this. But essentially, one of the problems with bicarbonate is that it produces carbon dioxide. I know we've got a better example of this. Maybe we'll get to it, maybe we won't. But the debate has been raging about, the overall effects of baking soda in terms of reducing or increasing pH, acidity. And right now, I think there's something else that we were going to display, but the video guy's on vacation. Let's see if we can find what we were looking for. Is that possible? I don't think we're going to find it. This is it. This is it right here. So essentially, what happens to bicarbonate, so baking soda is sodium bicarbonate and becomes bicarbonate by a magical process known as your stomach and the like, probably the liver. But this bicarbonate attracts a hydrogen ion, a proton, essentially, to give us water and carbon dioxide. In any case, this carbon dioxide can cause acidification in the cells as well. And, when we were dreaming up this presentation, we hoped that it would flow a little bit better than this at this stage while talking about it. But we have a interesting article here, effect on sodium bicarbonate on intracellular pH under different buffering conditions. And in some studies it says the effects of sodium bicarbonate on intracellular pH under different buffering conditions was not as expected. Previous in vitro studies have reported a paradoxical exacerbation of intracellular acidosis following bicarbonate therapy due to the generated CO2 entering the cytoplasm. Now, who would have thought of this, right? Like, wait a second. As you're, eating up protons or hydrogen, maybe this was the equation. This one flows a little bit better with our presentation. But essentially, as you're gobbling up hydrogen protons or ions, if you will, you're making carbon dioxide. And this carbon dioxide has to respirate somewhere. Otherwise, as it, concentrates, this will render the situation more acidic as well. So it's kind of like, wide is the gate that leadeth to destruction. There are many ways to destruction, ladies and gentlemen. Hydrogen protons, carbon dioxide. Speaking of carbon dioxide, this deep state is like carbon monoxide. You can't smell it, you can't see it, but it'll kill you. And maybe some people out there want to argue that carbon monoxide doesn't exist either. But for those that are trusting the science, the science is where it's at, ladies and gentlemen. And we've already told you that, the science proves creation. So, there's something there. There's something about observing and testing and experimenting. But the science has become political. And now every scientist wants to be a good little minion for the dark side, pushing their expensive drugs, injecting people with unsafe vaccines. We could be here all day. But in any case, there is a concern about the accumulation of carbon dioxide and the reverse effect of, acidification. And, we were talking about this tumor study, wherever it went, metastases and all of that. And they were talking about the increased metabolism, etc., acidic pH on the surface or on the exterior of the tumor here. So they seem to think that there isn't a very positive effect on what's happening on the inside. Now, this study, which has been cited, numerous times, if we can find it again. Nope, not that one. Try again. On this one, the effect of sodium bicarbonate on intracellular pH under different buffering conditions, which is very thorough in the sense, but, how do you cover all the bases? In the conclusion, it was basically saying, the study demonstrates that a sodium bicarbonate load does not exacerbate intracellular acidosis when cells are placed on a particular medium versus one that isn't so conducive to, let's say, an in vivo environment. But essentially, they came to the conclusion that the studies that previously cite an exacerbating effect on the acidosis should not be used to argue against bicarbonate therapy. And look, we've been seeing, the use of baking soda in emergency rooms to treat acidosis for quite some time. It works well for certain things, and it may not work so well for other things. And so to anyone that can tell you, for sure 100% that baking soda works or doesn't work when it comes to this and other things, well, the science, isn't absolutely conclusive. Some of it is situation, depends on the situation. And some of it kind of depends on, the real science. Our recommendation at this stage, given, what we've seen and haven't seen on this particular topic, would be probably 1 teaspoon a day, 5 days a week, mixed with water, and, see how that goes for you. That's a very safe, more or less, level for most people. Now, look, we're not a medical professional. We're not officially licensed, but we do have a thorough background in all sorts of sciences. And so, look, consult your doctor. But I would say that this is definitely worth researching. You would think that there would be more research onto things like this as a cheap and easy solution. Now, as a testimonial, I can say that I've been trying baking soda for quite a few months, between 1 and 2 teaspoons a day. And does it make a difference? Maybe a little bit. I'm still here though. So the thing is that you don't know what it didn't. You'll never know what never happened. And so you'd never know, how much worse it would have been had you not tried it. But then again, what do you really know out there, ladies and gentlemen? Well, we could sit here all day. I'm not sure if you'd want to hear me all day talk about this. But, We'll talk about this in a little bit more for a little while longer while we have you here. This is Stranger Than Fiction News. So we're examining right now the effects of baking soda on SARS-CoV. Now, why would we even ask the question? It's like looking for a needle in a haystack. Why this one? SARS coronavirus entry into host cells through a novel endocytic pathway that references, pH or acidity as, a cofactor for infection. Now, we've been looking at, some of the hydroxychloroquine articles in, Nature magazine, perhaps the most prestigious science magazine out there. And in this, 2020 article, they talk about the pH of acidic intracellular organelles being a cofactor for membrane fusion, whatever that means, right? So it got you thinking, well, what about baking soda, right? And there isn't a whole lot of there's not a whole lot of white papers on the subject, to be quite honest with you. But we did find this one that was maybe rated B, from India. SARS-CoV causing SARS coronavirus 2 causing COVID-19 has appeared on a global scale, et cetera, et cetera. And eventually, they talk about molecular targets of SARS, COVID, virtually, more or less the same kind of understanding that others, other research papers are referencing. pH-dependent viral entry, like other coronaviruses. The science, there's a lot of papers out there talking about pH, being a cofactor. Entry of SARS-CoV-2 into a host cell seems to be pH dependent. Now, that doesn't mean that you eliminate, all of the processes, but what it tells you is that the lower your pH, the worse it is. And not only for, SARS-CoV, but other viruses as well, according to the science, and cancers. So this is a very interesting kind of idea to think about, how acidic are you with all of the soda and the industrial food that you eat? Is this, kind of like a hidden back door, a way that they kind of, kill you, slow kill you in disguise? Who would have thunk, but what about that carbonic acid in the soda? What about all of the things that all the acidic stuff that you see, in the ingredients list? And this is another thing that we wanted to recommend too. So you're going to want to write this down. And it's also why it's important to listen to all of these live shows, because they're unscripted. It's just like whatever comes out, that's what comes out. But given that there's a risk of, increased carbon dioxide at the intracellular level due to, sodium bicarbonate, baking soda, we would recommend, take your teaspoon before you go run or something like that. Probably like half hour, 45 minutes before you go run. And just breathe it in, breathe it out, But hopefully that'll have, that will mitigate perhaps some of it. But again, the research is still out there when it comes to what's happening inside the cell in terms of pH after a dose of, oral baking soda. Anyways, in fact, there's a lot of white papers out there talking about pH dropping, acidosis, fusion of viral and cell membranes, et cetera, et cetera. So this is a well understood principle. Mechanisms of action of sodium bicarbonate. Now, what's important to notice or note here is that bicarbonate is naturally found in the body. It's used as a regulator. That's right, we said it, regulator for different activities. And essentially, the human cell already has a transport mechanism set up to bring bicarbonate from the blood into the cell. So that's why this molecule is rather interesting, because it can go directly from your mouth and into your blood with, rather high efficiency, as well as into your cells. And, not every molecule is like that. Not every molecule will make it into the cell, even though it makes it into the blood. But the fact that there's this natural transport mechanism, 3 different types of carbonic or bicarbonates, 3 different bicarbonate transport systems in the cell membranes. So, at least. And, some of them are, they work like a pendulum. One thing in it, one thing goes in, one thing comes out. And that's the way it kind of keeps the, the charge or, flowing. And some things are based on, there's a bicarbonate pump based on chlorine. And so you probably want to get some, regular salt in you. Good, just to have a little bit of everything, a little bit of every mineral that you can, essentially. That's, good for you. Keep your body primed, in terms of its chemistry. Have every ingredient there, because one of the things that they talk about, in biochemistry rather often are, limiting factors. When you run out of one thing, then all of a sudden the whole mechanism stops. It's kind of like, you run out of gas, the car stops. You might have the wheels, you might have the engine, you might be there with your driver's license and your insurance, but without gas, you can only go so far. And gas tends to be, the most limiting factor in that equation, right? Ooh, 5G death towers. How many of you have an EMF 390? You thought we were kidding? Oh, we know about the science. If we tell you to get a meter and measure, you better go run and get one right now. STFNreport.com. To find the meter at 129, blows away the competition. Shop around, of course, but you'll be back. And check out, the link can be found on our Facebook page, STFN Reloaded. So, we're reloaded because of the book burning out there. They love to burn books. They love to, stifle ideas. I mean, their ideas are so weak that they have to silence everybody and make it look legitimate. Oh, no, it was community standards. Who are they kidding? Right? I mean, they want to censor this broadcast, and we're by far, like, the most intelligent show out there. By far. Way, way far. Like light years, warp speed ahead of everybody else. And they want to censor this broadcast. The blood of, these innocent people are on, these tech companies and these politicians. All right? And these tech gurus and the like that want to plug your ass into the matrix and send you to Mars. Boom, bitches. To them, you're just like cows grazing in the pasture, waiting for the slaughterhouse. How does that make you feel? Triple moo. All right, we better wrap this up here. In any case, what else we got? There's probably a few more things that we could cover in this article, scientific paper. Bicarbonate ions are impermeable to the membrane, and their movement is facilitated by specific membrane proteins or channels or transport systems. This is cell biology 101. Maybe not like, the biology you got in high school, but in any case, let's see, I think there was probably something else. Conclusion, novel coronavirus entry into host cells is pH dependent and has caused, a crisis. Perhaps we could find a cheaper, safer way of curtailing, the worst cases out there. Because, they're saying here in their vaccine trials that old people pretty much aren't getting protected by the vaccine. That's important that everybody should know right now. That should be like the title of a new broadcast. Breaking news. None of the vaccines in the trials right now are proven effective with, on people over 65. And that means that everybody else has to get vaccinated to protect the old people. And they could just be taking baking soda and maybe that works just as well, And that's maybe what we should be looking at too. Why don't we, have a nursing home that's just taking hydroxychloroquine as a prophylactic? Let's have another nursing home that's taking, sodium bicarbonate as a prophylactic. And then we'll just have everybody else be the control group and we'll see who does better. But these people, they'll sneak into that nursing home and just start, lethal injecting everybody just so that, the evidence doesn't go out there. Because they want to sell you their cure. They want to sell you their vaccine. They're going to make trillions and quadrillions of dollars. They're building the Starship Enterprise looking at you like cows and you're paying for it. And they're exterminating you. They're infecting your kids. And just wait until you hear what this virus really does. Oh, I know they're going to ban this shit. Because if people actually knew what was going on, it would be mutiny. We've been betrayed, ladies and gentlemen. Now, coronavirus disease spectrum. We'll get into where this comes from, but it's a very credible source. You'll see for yourselves here pretty soon. But in any case, what we know from studies, that have been spanning for decades on coronavirus is that these types of viruses love attacking, the entire organism. It's not just like the lungs. That may be what kills, some people first is the infection of the lungs, but it's not limited to that. And what we're seeing in all of the, clinical studies, laboratory studies and the like, is that, this thing attacks the brain, it attacks the liver, it attacks the kidneys, it attacks everything. And, it's so consequential, in fact, that this, is not only like airborne AIDS, because it just devastates the immune system. And that's why it's important, everything that you can do to, improve your chances. It's worth trying, a teaspoon of baking soda, high quality. Don't get the industrial, toilet cleaner. This stuff does a lot of things, But you can, baking soda is what you make cookies with. Baking soda is nothing compared to what you find in cookies at the grocery store. Baking soda is the least of your concerns in the cookies at the grocery store. But, any little thing that you can do to improve your chances, like, and we talk about, make sure you got all of your vitamins and your minerals at 100% every day. Especially magnesium. You might want to go 150% on the magnesium, the zinc. Any little thing that you can do to improve your chances of a normal life, the better it is. And a lot of things like zinc and, baking soda, for example, have the potential of really being game changers, as well as other things. And we've talked about the need for anti-inflammatories, herbal anti-inflammatories. We usually put out a list in the video descriptions on the ScrewTube channel. You might not get a whole lot of that on the fake book, but, find our ScrewTube channel for all of those, herbs and the like, but it's like forsythia and chicory and, turmeric and other things, right? But this disease thrives on acidity. It thrives on inflammation. It thrives on, the asphyxiation or hypoxia of the victim. And this is why these masks aren't the best idea. Long-term, all day, kids in school all day wearing a mask is not a good idea. It's just going to give them brain damage and all sorts of other things. So, but that's so fitting of our public school system right now. They're like, oh yeah, how can we brain damage the children even further? Wear a mask all day. What they need are like, pods, air pods, hermetically sealed air pods for the classrooms. HEPA filters everywhere, in the HVAC systems. Reducing, virus load everywhere is going to be the key to, beating this disease. And, a chemical isn't necessarily the solution. Spraying, chlorine everywhere isn't necessarily the solution for a million different reasons. But, they're out there like idiots. Put your mask on. Let's spray bleach everywhere. Don't go outside. No sunshine. It's like, where do these people come from if it's not hell itself? And that's another key factor. Everybody needs sunshine. Sunshine, ladies and gentlemen. 10, 15 minutes of sunshine a day, especially on the chest. Not just the arms, not just the neck. You got to get it on the chest everywhere. Everywhere. You know what I'm saying? So get some sunshine. Lots of fresh air. Fresh air, especially in the wintertime. When everybody turns on their, heaters and the fireplace and the like. Fresh air. Fresh air. When you're cooking, fresh air. Fresh air everywhere. No detergents, no perfumes, fresh air. No organic volatile compounds, fresh air. And this would have been the advice, any decent scientist, biologist would have been giving people day one, of this outbreak. And if they were going to lock everybody down, they should have done it, when they first heard of it back in November. Because that's when they first heard of this outbreak in Wuhan back in November. That was the only chance to kind of contain it and slow burn it. But now, they're like, oh, we were going for the herd immunity with airborne AIDS. Okay, then. We're still waiting for your AIDS vaccine, by the way. So hepatitis, major concern with coronavirus. But, hepatitis can take years. So can, AIDS. It can take years before your white blood cell count drops to that level where it's now AIDS, Here they're talking about encephalomyelitis. Let's just call it encephalomyelitis. Murine coronaviruses can cause encephalitis in, infant and adult mice. The strain, this is what we're finding with all coronaviruses. I mean, this is, the mouse, the murine type, but they're all pretty much, the same kind of pathology. They just gobble up, the cells that they love the most. But here they say, this strain is especially neurotropic. Now, some strains are more or less like, some strains are more like MS, and other strains are more like mad cow disease or rabies. And so there's different pathways, different strains, and it's just like a little modification and just like one little thing. And boom, it's all of a sudden it's now, more like mad cow than it was MS. And we just don't know which one, it is, but it's one of them. This virus that's circulating, that's infected everyone. And it won't be for 5 years before we really have a clear understanding of what the long-term neurotropic effects are. But this thing is a ticking time bomb. You think like, oh, well, shit, I didn't get the pneumonia. I'm okay. Think again. Everybody's been dusted by this stuff. And whether you admit it to people or not, everybody's been affected by this. And, a lot of people are out there, I'm the macho man. From our, reports and, the intelligence that we've been getting, it looks like everybody has pretty much been dusted by this virus everywhere, even out there in the jungle. You know what I mean? Now, this is really interesting. By the natural intranasal route of infection, the virus invades the central nervous system. This is why they're jabbing, these big sticks up people's noses. They want to make sure it gets into your brain. And that's how evil these people are. You know, we heard that the first round of tests that they sent out to all the hospitals were openly admitted to being contaminated with coronavirus. That means everybody that got tested in like the first round, they got contaminated whether they were positive or not. And, you know, it was mostly like hospital workers and first responders. So they basically infected everybody, you know, that would infect everybody else. Now, here's something that we also wanted to talk about again is that, you know, in their studies, they said that most infections are often subclinical or inapparent, but clinical disease can be activated by co-infection with other agents. And all of a sudden you can see that, you know, they're looking to be able to steer the disease. We can activate it. Now we can make it worse. And now we know that there's all sorts of things that make it worse, like EMF, radiation, cell phones, cell towers, routers, Wi-Fi, the works, the wireless headphones, right? So everybody's like a ticking time bomb with this, you know, multi-virus, the super virus. You know, it attacks the intestines and the like. But essentially, just about everything associated with the immune system, from the liver to, you know, the spleen to, you know, lymph nodes and the like, are affected. Can be, chances are, you know, many of these, you know, organ features, you could say, will remain, you know, hidden reservoirs for a resurgence of the infection, you know, at a later date. So even if people accumulate, you know, antibodies for like, you know, 30 days or 90 days, it'll stay dormant and come back like herpes essentially and reinfect or basically reemerge, and then, you know, you loop until eventually it just gets you. You know, especially with a virus like this. I mean, maybe not herpes, but a virus like this that goes dormant and reemerges to infect, you know, every organ, including the brain and the heart and all that stuff. I mean, this thing will eventually get you. That's why everybody should be pissed off. It's like you've been murdered already and you don't even know it. That's essentially what we're looking at here, ladies and gentlemen. And that's why, you know, these people's heads have got to roll. Let's get them now, because they've probably got the real cure. They're probably not as affected as the rest of us. And most people are running around like, oh, I'm okay, I've survived. Think of fucking again. Pardon my language, but think again. There's no guarantee of that. And so you better, you know, it's better to act right now like they've killed you already and you don't know it yet, than to be like, oh, I made it, it's okay, there's no virus. Because I don't think there'd be facilities like this or this amount of research on a thing that didn't exist. You know, somebody would have figured it out. Oh no, this is a joke. This is not a joke. You know, cancer is not a joke. Science, you know, isn't a joke, it's an observation. Now, the science can be politicized, it can be weaponized, but it can also be used to help people. And, you know, if we live in a free society, then we should be able to talk about these kind of things and help people versus trying to politicize the issues so we can see who can make the most money out of it. Because clearly we see problem, reaction, solution here. You know, if they're politicizing this topic and any type of thing that might help it so that they can make money off of it, then that means that, you know, that's their motive for infecting you. And they have infected you. And we've talked about where this comes from. It's not just Wuhan, it's Cicero out there in Geelong, Melbourne, the epicenter of, you know, the new crisis, the new COVID crisis. So check out our video archives for more on that. But this thing is a lab-borne disease that's been weaponized to exterminate you. And that's, you know, and that's the end of the story. And, you know, guess who's out there like Dr. Death, like, you need my vaccine. What's in your vaccine? The world would like to know. We'll leave it there for this broadcast. Appreciate everybody tuning in. Check us out next time. You can get the coordinates. I mean, you know, this channel might move around because they're just hardcore censoring. So, you know, if you lose track of us, go to our website, sdfnreport.com, and just go through the news articles there, and you'll find our latest broadcast. We broadcast every day. And look, we do a lot of serious research, and we have a huge impact on the narrative. We prime the pump when it comes to what's really going on out there. And, we need your support, ladies and gentlemen. I know everybody needs, support and all that stuff, but we could be doing something else. You don't think we could? I could be working at Cicero right now, inventing a virus to infect you. But instead, we're trying to expose these people. But we're not getting the financial donations from, the government. We're not getting any type of sponsorship or grants or advertisement revenue from Google or Facebook or anything like that. We're 100% listener supported. They got millions and billions and trillions of dollars to poison you with. And right now our budget is just, a couple $100. So, good luck out there. That's why I'm up in the mountains, because, conservatives just aren't serious about organizing and fighting back. We need to organize and deliver, just like the civil rights movement in the 1950s and 60s. Why is every movement, basically successful? Is because they can organize and deliver. And right now we're just, trying to organize. But eventually, we'd like to deliver. So support our broadcast, support our network. Get a meter or, buy the video guy a beer. But every little bit helps so that we can, get a bunker and, do more research for you while, things spiral out of control. And hopefully we covered everything there. But if not, we'll be back next time for, more updates. Until then, ladies and gentlemen, if you're listening to this, how do you buy the video guy a beer? Patreon.com/STF News. Patreon.com/STF News for Stranger Than Fiction News. Till the next time, ladies and gentlemen, if you're listening to this, you are the resistance.